Imagine getting up every day full of energy as if you were in your 20s again. What would that be like? What would it be worth to you? What is your health worth to you? Think about it. Your health isn't everything, but without it, everything else is nothing. And yet, too many of us are taking it for granted until something goes wrong. And no one wakes up hoping to be diagnosed with a disease or chronic illness. And yet, we've never been taught how to be proactive in our health through our school or public health. As a registered health coach and integrative health practitioner, I believe it's time this information is made available to everyone. Combining new knowledge around your health and the ability to do my functional medicine lab tests in the comfort of your own home will allow you to optimize your health for today and all your tomorrows. Don't wait for your wake-up call. Welcome back to another episode of the Don't Wait for Your Wake-Up Call podcast. I am here with Ann Metcalfe, my dear friend and colleague. Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm very excited to have you on the show and have this conversation today. And let me just introduce you to the audience. Ann is a teacher, author, and advocate who conducts weekly Facebook conversations about conscious eating and living aimed at awakening the rebel in us through knowledge. She is also a retired registered nurse and encourages growing food ourselves, practicing mindfulness in our kitchens and taking personal responsibility. And doing this, we can achieve whole, optimal wellness. Our connection to the earth and conscious eating are critical keys to peace and harmony in our lives. She recently became an ageless grace educator, promoting a new and exciting brain health fitness program. So love all of that, Ann. And today we're talking about gut health. This is an area in which you have expertise, and I also want to bring in conversations around you as a teacher and what you see with the children in the classroom, etc. However, let's start out just by talking about gut health. And if you want to give me an overview on why is our gut health so important?
Oh, yeah, it's hard to create a little snippet. It's vital. We are divinely designed. Our microbiome, trillions of bacteria in our gut, knows how to basically digest, process our food, and then send it off to the liver and the brain and throughout all our systems. And, when we eat that whole real food, it knows what to do with it. And it keeps us healthy. It's where our immune system begins.
Yes.
And this beautiful connection with the brain and the gut, and they now think there's a gut brain as well. And that whole flow is what keeps us thriving. And the gut microbiome is just it's a complex system, and yet it knows how to do its work. And it's like that silent worker that loves us so completely. And, when we add foods that aren't so good for us, it tries its best. And then you've got sort of the kind of good bacteria and bad bacteria. And then there's this kind of little struggle going on when we feed too much of the processed food, because it doesn't really know what to do with it. It's not part of our divine design. And the plants grown in the soil are part of that divine design. That's how we were created to work together.
The chemicals that are in the processed food are what the body doesn't know how to handle.
That's right.
And so it, as you said, it does its best. However, it's as we're eating too much processed food, we're negatively impacting our overall health. So let's talk about what else can negatively impact our gut health in terms of, what's happening in our world today.
Oh, well, that's a big can of worms, a big Pandora's box. You've got environmental factors. You've got pollution, you've got toxins that are coming from the air and the water, and actually in some of the maybe not so much these days, well, maybe still, you've got those the food reacting in the canned food right? So there's that. And then, so these toxic heavy metals that are coming at us, and a lot of them get lodged in the brain and in different parts of our body. And so that's another thing that, partly the gut microbiome is going, okay, what is this stuff? We just tuck it away into some fat cells and hide it and protect the body. And then the liver has to deal with all that kind of stuff. And then it affects how we think, because it's affecting sort of the mental processes that the brain goes through, in our everyday activities.
It's causing inflammation in the body. It's starting to create brain fog, etc. And you're right about the body, wanting to protect the body from it. So it stores it in our fat closets. And our fat closets are in our brain, which is why these metals can end up stored in our brain and become neurotoxins. There's also something else that you've mentioned there in terms of the heavy metal toxins is generationally, as we've had more and more heavy metals come into our environment, they're actually moving through the placenta into baby. And our babies are being born more toxic than ever.
Yeah.
And again, the body doesn't know what to do with this. And so, especially when it comes to heavy metal toxins, we have to do more to help get those toxins out. And that can also tie into some of the diagnoses that children are getting at a young age.
Yeah.
ADHD, autism, etc., and impact their learning because it's impacting the brain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That gut-brain connection is so incredibly important. So let's talk about that in terms of what you're seeing in the classroom. And you told me about a control group and a study that kind of happened a little bit organically and what you saw. And I would love for you to share that with the audience because parents are looking for this information.
Yeah. Well, I've been teaching probably over 20 years as a substitute teacher mainly. And I've talked with other teachers, and it's a huge issue. And I don't know that a lot of teachers have related it to food. I do from the reading I've done. And it's, you've got kids who are hyper and they've got all these little fidget toys that kids have. So there's this constant fidgeting with things around their desk. And when they're doing that fidgeting, they're not focused. I try and sort of teach these kids. Sometimes I'm only in there for a day. And, this mindfulness and this quiet and this calm, and I do breathing and different things. And some of those kids cannot sit still. And some of it is, there's a lot of behavior problems on top of just the fidgeting. Now they have, what do they call it, brain breaks all the time. I know they know that adults, and I think kids it's 10 to 15 minutes, and adults it's 20 minutes, and you lose their concentration on what the speaker is saying. And so now these brain breaks are way more often than what they seem to used to need. Maybe they did always need them, but it's more and more. And these kids, can we have our brain break now, please? And they run around the gym, or the field a couple of times, and they're out for 10 minutes. And then, of course, that disrupts the whole learning process and from the teacher point of view. So there is that, and there seem to be more and more of these kids with this whole ADHD, autism spectrum. Because there's such a wide range of behaviors with this. And then I was doing some reading. Actually, it's a really good book. I just found somebody else shared it with me. And it's called Metabolical by Robert Lustig. And he was explaining this, what they did in the UK. And it was a community, and I guess it's little pockets of schools within the community. And so they targeted this one school, and they fed them healthy food for lunches, because like in our schools, they have a hot lunch, but I think it's different from what they do in the UK and the States. But I wouldn't want my kids eating any of the hot lunch food that they give, like cold hot dogs and things like that. But in the study, the outside communities was the control group. And so these students were fed healthy food at school. And I'm not sure what the time duration was, but when they found a 40% increase in the sort of the English language arts and science. So they're in that short time of eating healthy food, their body changed. And all of a sudden,
And their brain changed.
So that they could focus.
Yeah.
Because when you're irritable, with all the sugars and the food, and it's so widespread, drinks and food, so all of a sudden they're not getting fed that. And so the body's just naturally, I don't know, just calming itself down. It's not getting irritated by the fructose and the other added sugars. So it made such a difference. And, if we could do something like that, because I know you and I have talked about how do we do that in our school system? How do we get schools involved?
I do remember another story that you told me. You went to a school somewhat locally to you as a substitute teacher, and at that school, the parents were not allowed to send their children sugary snacks. And that was the only school that you worked at that did that locally. And you did notice a difference in the behavior of the kids at that school versus the other schools, which were also essentially the control group.
Well, it was a kindergarten grade 1 class, and they also had a minute of mindful gratitude for the whole school. So that sets the tone. And no juices were allowed, and no snack bars, like granola bars weren't allowed, and no sugar cookies, all that kind of stuff. And they had a little note that would go home, and please save this kind of food for after school.
Right.
And I'm going, wow, there's a lot of courage. And, I'm not sure, who created that? Did they do it with cooperation with the PAC group? Was it just administration? Because I have never seen it anywhere else in all the different schools I've gone to.
And yet you notice the difference in the children's behavior from just those two things, the mindfulness gratitude and not filling up on sugary snacks and drinks.
Yeah, it was actually a nice class to teach.
And the kids, I'm sure, felt better in their bodies as well.
Yes, yeah, even though they wouldn't be able to explain why.
Right.
But when they come to school and they're eating carrot sticks and bananas and all the things that, you fed your kids, I tried to feed mine. And and it's, for parents, it's a bit of an uphill battle because you've got the kids. And the other thing, too, is these parties they have and the parents that bring in cupcakes, and the teachers, I go, thank you. Actually, the class I was in the fall, she actually sent a note. We both did in the planners because somebody's birthday was coming up, and please do not send cupcakes.
Right.
And the parent listened, and she bought little baggies, and I think they had a pencil, a little pad of paper, and there might have been one little candy.
Right.
It wasn't the cupcakes that they traditionally bring.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, if there are parents listening, you can certainly, collaborate with other parents in your child's classroom and talk to the teacher and create this in your school for your own children. If you too are concerned about the amount of sugar and processed food that the kids are eating. And, it's hard for them to learn when they're so hopped up on sugar. It's hard for them to focus. In my own daughter's case, back when she was in grade 2, even though I was feeding them really carefully when they were younger, then they do start to go to school, as you said, and then they want the same snacks as the other kids. and she was really sensitive to sugar. And at the end of grade 2, her teacher said, her handwriting has regressed this year and her ability to focus. And I wasn't in health and wellness then. And I appreciated the feedback. And I thought about, how do I support this over the summer? And I didn't know. So I asked the teacher, and thank goodness for this teacher, because the teacher said it might be food related. And so that's when we went and had food sensitivity testing done with a naturopath and found out that she is actually highly sensitive to sugar. And we cut it out of her diet, and she was a changed child. And she was my oldest, and I just accepted her behavior as her behavior because I was so used to it. She would have meltdowns all the time, even at 7 years old. And the key was she would say, "I don't know why I'm crying, Mommy." And it's because her body felt out of control. So as you said earlier, the kids wouldn't be able to explain why they feel better when they're eating the healthy food. However, when they're not eating healthy food, they don't feel good in their body, and they don't necessarily know why. So she would be going, "I don't know why I'm crying." And we figured out it was the connection to food, and we changed her diet, and the meltdown stopped.
Yeah.
And so there is such a strong connection to kids' behavior and the health of their gut and the food they're eating. So I know you have some stats for us in regards to sugar, as do I. So let's just start talking about sugar. And I learned something from you even before we hopped on this call today, and that was in regards to baby food and formula. So I would love you to share that.
Oh, okay. That came from the metabolical book that I've been reading. And I'll just see if I can find it quickly. But it was as from a young age of like 6 months, if parents are feeding their babies the prepared food, the mashed peas or whatever, the food company added sugar to it. And this is where reading your labels is absolutely essential. You've got to read your label and what is in it. And so so 6 months, and then, so that sets the pattern for them wanting more sugar.
Right.
And so the food industry said, well, we can do that for you. And so they just keep adding it. And there was something about, feeding like a cookie to kids. And what that does, it stimulates an insulin release, which drives the energy into fat tissue, which releases the leptin, which reaches the hypothalamus, activates the sympathetic nervous system, which leads to increased energy. And that's when we see these kids with a behavior. And so you've got this increased energy expenditure. So that energy's got to go somewhere, including involuntary contraction of the muscle cells, aka fidgeting, to maintain this energy neutrality, which is what the body wants. And they found that with obese 5-year-olds, they just want more cookies because the brain is leptin resistant. So there's no rebalancing of the energy output. They need more sugar. But it's just interesting that at a very young age, so mothers who are breastfeeding are kind of doing the right thing. It's interesting with the whole breastfeeding, bottle feeding, using the soother. Mm-hmm. And what they found is that babies who are bottle fed, it actually narrows the palate, mm-hmm. and it affects the respiration. Mm-hmm. And they are in a greater risk of a couple of different diseases. The breathing, we call it when they have to at nighttime, They have that, so they're breathing through their mouth
Right.
instead of through their nose, and that changed. So that it's, I mean, so these are things that can happen in the child's future by starting them on this path of the high sugar and the whole processed food. And that's why it's so important. That's why we're having this conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to add to a few things that you've said there in terms of the mouth breathing, I have a colleague who's a dental practitioner, and she sees a lot of children who are mouth breathers, and that is a slippery slope to other health issues. So if your child is a mouth breather and you would like to have that addressed now, because we can change that, reach out to me, because I would be happy to connect you with my colleague. And in fact, she has been on the podcast previously back in the beginning of January 2023. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. And then in regards to our gut health, it is positively impacted by breastfeeding, because even though the food industry tells us formula is the same as breast milk, it actually isn't. And the breast milk has prebiotics in it that the baby's little digestive system can't even break down. And it's for the microbes, and it's helping to build the foundation of their gut. And bottle formula simply doesn't do that. And I think you mentioned too, the food industry is adding sugar to the baby formula as well, which is completely unnecessary. And yet they know how addictive it is. And there was research done in terms of the addictivity to sugar by humans. And they tested it on mice and rats, because our DNA is actually very similar, which is why so much scientific testing is done on rats and mice. And they gave them cocaine water to drink for a few days. And then they took away the cocaine water and they gave them sugar water to drink for a few days. And then they gave them back the cocaine water. So they now had a choice of the cocaine water or the sugar water. And guess what they chose? They chose the sugar water. Now, I'm not saying that that means you should be having cocaine. I am not saying that at all. Absolutely not. My point is, we all know that cocaine is highly addictive. But do we realize that sugar is even more addictive? And the food industry does, and they want you to buy more of their products. That fuels their bottom line. Therefore, there is so much sugar in everything that is packaged in the grocery store, including baby formula and baby foods. So just a little bit of history here on how much sugar intake has increased over the last 200 plus years. In 1800, people were consuming about 22 pounds of sugar per year. By 1900, that was at 90 pounds per year. And by 2012, it was over 180 pounds per year of sugar.
Yeah. And I'm going to add something to that, Melissa.
Please do.
And this is in the United States, and apparently 60% of infants consume daily added sugar at 6 months of age. And after 6 months, it goes up to 98% eating sugar added food with all the foods that they're giving them. And they're just, all these different colleges are saying that babies and toddlers shouldn't be consuming any added sugar. And they were arguing for a mandatory guideline on sugar content of toddler foods to encourage that sort of reformulation of their body's natural, the whole gut health thing, where they can, be healthy. They're not having sort of breakdowns like your daughter did. Yeah, so it's it's complex, but if we can encourage, your listeners and our friends and family to just pay more attention to what they're feeding, because we talked about this before, and some parents don't know.
Right.
they don't understand. Oh, it's just a little bit of sugar. It's just a little bit of this. Well, by the time you add things up, these kids are eating, well, I mean, the juices, those little cute little juice boxes, can be up to 22 grams of sugar. Well, that's
28 grams I've seen.
28 grams. And that's past their.
With no added sugar. That's all natural sugars as well. So parents think it's okay. However, 28 grams of sugar is 7 teaspoons. Would you feed your child 7 teaspoons in one sitting? Never.
Never. No.
Now,
No.
the fruit is great. When we eat the apple, we're getting the fiber with it. And so that helps slow the insulin response, et cetera, et cetera. But when we just drink the juice, we've taken the juice and all the natural sugars out, and we have no fiber or anything else to be slowing that insulin response. So I love that you brought up drinks. It's not just food that we're getting our sugar through, it's also through our drinks. And it's absolutely incredible how much people are getting through their drinks. And as an example, soft drinks account for 1/5 of total sugar consumption amongst children and teenagers in the UK. And in the US, it's nearly half of sugar consumption is coming from sweetened beverages. So we're drinking it without even knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And actually, you know, it's interesting. I don't see a lot of juice boxes coming to the school that I'm at right now.
Right. That's awesome.
So that's a good thing. So I don't know if, I think there was I was reading somewhere in their school mandate, letter that goes out to parents, and they do talk about healthy food, but not really too specific stuff. Because when I was in this grade 2 class, and we did this Fresh Food Friday, and it encouraged the students to bring like real food, fresh food, because they would bring all sorts of stuff. And so we tallied, okay, what fruit did they have, and what vegetable did they have, and you know, the kids actually got excited. So they go, oh, Mrs. M, I have an apple today. Oh, Mrs. M, I've got carrots. I've got tomatoes. So, you know, they were just so excited about these foods. I mean, they could see that, because I talked about it a bit, and I said, you've got gut buddies, and they need that whole food in order to be healthy, to help your immune system. Because, you know, the kids right now, I mean, seems to be an average of, you know, 3 to 5 kids away in each classroom that I'm teaching. And, you know, and those kids do have a natural immunity. But I just think, you know, when they're eating all these packaged snack foods, and actually one girl is bringing Ferrero Rocher, and they've got nuts in them. And we had a student who was very allergic to nuts. So I had to speak to her. I had to get an interpreter for her grandmother, who brought her to school. And I said, you can't put those in her lunch anymore because of the allergy situation. Yeah.
The other thing, too, that I wanted to share here was that back in 2014, the WHO announced that sugar consumption should be reduced to only 6 to 9 teaspoons of sugar per day. And that's 6 teaspoons for adult women and 9 teaspoons for adult men. So children would presumably be less, although they don't state that here. And to give you an idea of what 6 teaspoons of sugar looks like, it's 2/3 of a can of Coke, half a bottle of apple juice, and obviously that's going to depend on the brand, as well as a single serve of low-fat strawberry yogurt or 2 blocks of dark chocolate. So that just gives you an idea that in 2/3 of a can of Coke, you're drinking your entire optimal sugar intake as an adult woman for the day. So for a child, having a can of Coke is even more than their optimal intake, and that doesn't take into anything else that they've eaten through the entire day. And it's not to say that they can never have that. This isn't about that. It is to say they don't need it daily.
And the other thing with that, Melissa, is that these sugared drinks actually trick the brain into sort of uptaking the sugar from the can of pop or the juice. And it's almost like even though they're having maybe the apple or something else with natural sugar in it, the brain, it gets programmed. Because that sugar, the fructose, goes into the it's the feel good part of the brain. Mm-hmm. And so it remembers and go, oh, I like that stuff. That makes me feel good. And then almost to the expense of taking in the natural sugar. And I just wanted to kind of go back to that whole jaw-tongue thing with the OSA, which is the upper, let me see, hold on. Obstructive sleep apnea.
Yes.
And because the whole thing with the sugar, as the children gain weight, the fat is deposited in the tongue, in the soft palate, and the lateral pharyngeal walls, which results in enlargement of the tissue, narrowing the airway, which creates that, like the snoring for kids, because he was saying, if your kids are snoring, you need to get them to the doctor and look what's going on, because that breathing, that narrowing feeds the obesity, and the obesity feeds and they think that they're saying that 85% of sleep disordered breathing in children goes undiagnosed. Mm-hmm. 24% of ADHD is really a sleep disordered breathing that's been misdiagnosed.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I also want to say, while you were talking about that, I looked it up. And my colleague, Sherry Wirtz, who specializes in helping children learn how to breathe through their nose again, that was episode 100. So people can go back and listen to episode 100 to learn about Cherie's work and connect with her. And this is episode 165. So just so you know, when you're looking up the Don't Wait for Your Wake Up Call podcast, this one is episode 165. Go back to episode 100 and you'll find Cherie's work, because you're absolutely right, Anne, that it's absolutely critical. Our children should not be snoring. And if they are, we should be asking why. It is a symptom. And when a symptom is our body's way of talking to us, so that it brings it to our awareness, so we can get curious and say, why is that happening? So yes, thank you for bringing that up. And I want to add to another very common reason that children are diagnosed with ADHD is actually they are deficient in their omega-3s. Now, omega-3s are our essential fatty acids, and so are our omega-6s. However, the omega-6s are the inflammatory ones, and the omega-3s are the anti-inflammatory. The omega-6s are available through all of our processed foods and just about everything that we eat, because they're readily available in our vegetable oils and our canola oils, etc., etc. Whereas our omega-3s are harder to get because the best source is wild fatty fish. And our children are typically not eating wild fatty fish 3 to 4 times a week. And as a result, they become deficient relative to the amount of omega-6s they're taking into their diet. And research was again done in the UK, where they had a control group of kids using Ritalin, and then they had another control group of kids using omega-3s. And they were studied over a 12-month period. And at the end of the 12 months, as assessed by both parents and teachers, it was determined that the kids who used just omega-3s did just as well as the kids who used Ritalin, but there's no negative side effects to the omega-3s.
Yeah.
So we share this information with you because we want you as parents, even grandparents, to understand how the food your children eat impacts their behavior and their ability to learn. And we've talked about sugar in food and drinks. We've talked about ADD, ADHD, that spectrum of autism that you see in the classroom, and we could talk for hours on this. And we won't, don't worry. However, we just want this to be a starting point for you, the listener, to get curious, to start talking to your children about food and how the food they're eating is making them feel in their body. And when they start to eat less processed food and more plant-based food, they start to feel better in their body. Because when we create the environment for the body to heal, it heals very quickly.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, Melissa, I need to correct my information about that UK school.
Mm-hmm.
What they found was a 14% reduction in school absences.
Oh.
And they actually didn't have a percentage of, but they found a significant improvement in their English and science.
Okay.
And then, of course, the kids weren't missing school.
Right.
Right. So that in itself, I think is important for us to keep in mind.
It is, absolutely. Because again, when we create the environment for the body to heal, it will heal. And then we're not getting sick, we're not missing school. And as you mentioned earlier, the immune system is housed in the gut. In fact, it's 70% that's housed in the gut. So if our gut is healthier, our immune system is healthier, and we're not missing school.
Yeah.
This is all tied together. And I want to share an experience that you and I recently had working with a client of mine. And she is somebody that is, focused on her health, so working with me. However, she reached out on behalf of her 5-year-old son who had started kindergarten last September. And in January, the teacher came to her and said, based on your child's behavior in the classroom, he has ADHD and you need to go to the doctor and put him on drugs. And my client was very surprised by that because she didn't see that kind of behavior at home. And secondly, she didn't want to put her child on drugs. She wanted to see what other options she had for supporting her son. So she reached out to me. And of course, after the last story I shared, I recommended omega-3s. And they did see great results, even within a week. And even the teacher acknowledged that from just adding omega-3s. However, you also had some great suggestions for her in terms of being able to talk to the teacher about his behavior and talking to her son about his behavior. And I would love you to share just some of those because they were so helpful to me and to her in being able to turn this situation around.
Yeah. It's interesting because I went to a course several years ago with ADHD and Ritalin and the benefits of Ritalin. And now I would never recommend it because it just shuts down that child's, their whole being, their creativity. And so, one of the things I suggested was talk to her son. And why was he acting out? Was he bored? Because I've seen that happen. Kids are bored. They're super smart. And what they're learning, but they don't need to learn. In kindergarten, some of these kids, they already know their ABCs. Some of them even know how to read. And so they act out because they're bored. And and checking with him, okay, what's going on? What's going on in the classroom? I've been in some classrooms and they have 3 students that have their own EAs, educational assistants, because they cannot be left unsupervised in the classroom. So that's a disruption, right? So what's going on in the classroom? And also, I'm not sure if she actually got specific details about what the teacher was seeing in the classroom. And was he at the opposite end? Was he having problems with learning? Is his vision okay? Is he hearing the messages? Because I've seen kids, as a couple of these have been students who have come in from another country and don't know the English, and they just start I've seen a couple of them just sort of act out, and they're just doing what they want to do, and because they don't know what's going on, they can't understand the lesson. So if there's a hearing problem or a vision problem, what's going on. And are there other students perhaps that are adding to this? Because kids do that. You know, they see somebody fooling around and go, oh, okay, I'll do that too.
That looks like fun.
Yeah, you know, they want to experience that. And then, and talking to the teacher and sort of like, what are you seeing? What specifically? When is it happening? You know, is it just is it before lunch? You know, is he hungry? So there's a lot of different factors that I think parents need to go to the teacher and say, look, let's have a talk. And you don't have to reveal right away that you don't want Ritalin, or you can, because some teachers, that's what they've been sold on. That, you know, we'll give them the pills, calm them down, then they'll learn. Well, not always. And so I'm just so glad that she did what she did. And taking the omega-3, I mean, I'd love to put that into a parent newsletter, you know, without sort of offending anybody. Because if there are several, lots of ADHD and autistic kids. So have you found that the omega-3 helpful for autistic kids as well, Melissa? Or has that just been the ADHD experience?
The ADHD for sure. With autistic kids, what I tend to do is I'm looking at their gut health. I'm literally running a lab, because the lab is just a urine sample, and it will show me the state of their gut health. And what we do know is that typically with kids on the autism spectrum is their gut flora is 25% less variety in it than somebody who's not on the spectrum.
Oh, wow.
How do we support their gut health? And what are they eating? Because what I've also experienced, and I'm not a teacher, but I'm a Girl Guide leader, and I've had girls in my units that are on the spectrum, and what I see is their diet is very limited. Very often they only want to eat white foods. Well, white foods, pasta, white breads, white rice, all of that is a simple carb. Basically, it's sugar, and it creates that insulin response, et cetera, and it is not adding to the health of their gut. It is not building variety in their gut, microbiota. So that's where I always start working with kids that are on the spectrum, is healing the gut and making sure that they're getting a good dose of their vitamins and minerals, which again, when kids are eating a processed food diet, they're only getting 17 of the needed nutrients that we need to thrive, but we need 90 to thrive. Wow. And so kids on a processed food diet are seriously lacking in the vitamins and minerals that the body needs in order for them to be able to thrive. So and that was a great story, and I really appreciate your help and guidance in being able to guide my client in how to talk to the teacher and talk to her son, and then they did see results very quickly. And you're right that, there's so many other factors to look at. And you mentioned, the vision and the hearing, etc. Another recent guest that I had on my podcast, Rudy Nassif, that was episode number 156. He told a story about when he was a child in school. He was very sensitive to the energies. We're all energy, right? Everything is energy. And some people are more sensitive to others. So he was very sensitive to the energies from the lights in the classroom. And he could not be in the classroom because he didn't feel good because of the vibration of that energy that he was sensitive to. And so he says that he would deliberately be bad in the classroom because the teacher would send him outside. And he was so happy to get outside because then he was in natural sunlight, giving him the right amount of energy, and it didn't feel painful and to him, right? So he would be bad and he'd be sent out of the classroom. And he got kicked out of a number of schools, and it all came down to him looking after himself and nobody understanding it. Now, he's a brilliant man. He's gone on to be both a physicist and an engineer and create blue light blocking glasses in a system that you can wear during the day and the evening and at bedtime, because that's what he needed to do for himself. And now he does that for others. And all of us are impacted by indoor lighting.
Yeah.
When we wear these glasses, we can protect ourselves from that. So again, that might be a child in your classroom. If they're always acting out and you're sending them outside and they're perfectly happy outside, are they sensitive, because the schools are installing, cheap industrial lights, right?
Yes.
And that can impact some children.
Good point. And for me as a teacher, because right now I'm in the library, but generally I'm a substitute teacher and I go from school to school, class to class. And there are kids that want to leave the class all the time. And how do you have that conversation? And especially for parents, it's interesting to know if those children are actually talking to their parents and say, and as you said earlier, like your daughter couldn't express, and at what point can children say, you know what? And maybe during these parent-teacher conversations that they have, like what's going on, is there anything in particular? And normally, quite often teachers will say, well, he needs to go to the bathroom a lot or outside, kind of thing. And then that hopefully will stimulate the conversation with the child, say, why? And, if he was that sensitive, maybe he could feel, there's something in the room. And that's the other thing with classroom clutter.
Right.
For students like that. It might be the lights, and some of them, it's just too much stimulation. And some classrooms have those sound blocking earmuffs, headphones, so that they block out the shuffling and the extra noises that they find really irritating.
So all of this is really fascinating. And I want it to be, a beacon of hope for parents, that the answer doesn't have to be drugs. And there isn't anything wrong with your child. And your child doesn't need to be fixed. However, understanding how their symptoms are triggering their behavior, their ability to learn, allows you to be looking for solutions that can help them.
Yeah. So important.
And I love what you do as a teacher, and you're teaching mindfulness, and you're really, you're teaching the kids about the importance of whole plant-based food and just getting them excited about it, like doing your Friday days. I can't remember what you said that you called it, but when the kids were excited to say, I have a tomato and I have a carrot, like they're learning so much. And then they take that home too and teach their parents as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so, so much for the work that you do, because it's a beautiful way to, start shifting where we're at in the world today. So I love to ask all of my guests on the show, Ann, what does don't wait for your wake-up call mean to you?
Oh, that's a good one. I strive right now to be as healthy as I can be. I watch what I eat. I read my labels, because I don't want that wake-up call to say, oh dear, you've got diabetes or this or that. I consider myself ageless with the age I'm at. And I don't want the cosmic 2x4 to say, whoa, and be surprised at some kind of disease going on in my body. And so that's why I think conversations like this are so important, so that we bring that awareness. So it's, we're talking about kids and parents, and there's also, the whole longevity thing, I want to live, I want that whole optimum wellness. I call it my wow factor.
Yeah.
And so as I practice my eating, the exercise, etc., I don't want that surprise.
And that's beautiful. And I know that you do live that each and every day, which is absolutely awesome. And you brought something up that we didn't talk about, and it's diabetes. And I just want to mention that type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset diabetes. And they renamed it type 2 diabetes a number of years ago, because so many children were becoming diabetic because of what the food industry is doing with putting so much sugar in our foods. So, Anne, how can parents learn more and be advocates for their children at home and at school?
Oh, how can they learn more? Well, I think listening to programs like this. That book that I got, there's a lot of information, the metabolical. Be an advocate, and that might mean research, reading, listening to other sort of experts like you, and be informed. Because when you've got that information, you've got that knowledge, and then when you've got that knowledge, then I think that knowledge can give parents strength and the courage, because if they're looking at their kids and going, oh, then maybe I know there's a whole puberty thing, but I'm not talking about that. But looking at just being aware of what might happen if they don't pay attention now. And so and also they're in that process, they're teaching their children how to look after themselves when they get older.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Beautiful. So if people want to get hold of you, how can they get hold of you? And I know you've very generously offered a free gift here if you would like to talk about that as well.
Oh yeah, I created that a couple of years ago, and it's the 10 top tips your gut buddies will love you for. And it's about all different things. Sugar is one of them, and getting good sleep and exercise. Because, if we've got a healthy gut and they're happy, if our gut buddies are happy, then we're pretty healthy. And so it's a PDF, and they can get it with the link that I gave you.
Yep.
And that's actually on my app, Authentic Sacred Design. And I have different things about the body and the mind, the spirit, and the earth. And I will be actually adding some recipes once I get that system in place. So they just need to go to Authentic Sacred Design on my app. And it's the same name for my website. And if they want to email me, it's Rosie's Joy, ROSIESJOY 11 @gmail.com. So they can contact me that way if they want to.
Beautiful. I will have all of that in the show notes. And is there any last wisdom? I know you've been full of wisdom here today. Is there any last message you would like to leave with the audience?
Well, something that's come up, especially with that you were dealing with, trust your innate wisdom, especially when you've got little kids. Trust what you are feeling and seeing within them and you, and use the new information to guide you on this journey. And just have grace and compassion for yourself and your kids as you go through this, for some, a change in what you're eating.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Anne, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I've thoroughly loved chatting with you on these very important topics. And I know that there are many people that will hear this and be able to take this information and change their lives and their kids' lives for the better as a result. So thank you. And thank you as always to my listeners for tuning in each and every week. Please share this episode with someone that you know needs to hear it. And we'll be back same time, same place next week on the Don't Wait for Your Wake Up Call podcast.
Thank you, Melissa.
Are you a practitioner or a coach listening to this? If so, I would love to ask you, do you use hypnotherapy in your practice working with clients? And if not, would you like to? The power of hypnotherapy is limitless. And so often we experience our clients struggling to reach their goals. It's because they're coming up against their own brick walls and getting stuck. But you can help them through the power of hypnosis break through all of that, working with their unconscious mind to put the suggestions in, to have them taking the action to achieve the results that they want. They are thrilled with your coaching techniques. They're getting the results they want. You feel amazing because you are helping your client get the results they want. It's a win-win, And another win is that it's an added revenue stream for you in your business. So if you like the feel of helping your clients get the results they want, if you like the sound of that, then definitely reach out, Melissa at yourguidedhealthjourney.com, or click the Linktree link below for my Unlimited Power of Hypnosis class to learn more. It's a weekend designation program that I teach, valid in 42 countries. You write an exam after taking the experiential course, and you can be admitted to the American Board of Hypnotherapy and start using hypnotherapy one-to-one with your clients and have them achieving the results they want.